Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to cross the Øresund once again, and we're going to go back to Sjælland in Denmark and revisit a brewery that's featured on the channel once before. So the last beer that I had from this brewery was very nice. This is a brewery that are relatively new to the Danish beer scene, but they have been building a very strong reputation for themselves. Their beers have had very good write-ups, and the one that we're looking at today is the same style category that we looked at before, but it came as a recommendation from the guys at the Beer Hive in Amager in Copenhagen. And if you've watched the channel for any length of time, you'll know that these guys supply me with most of the Danish beers that I review, and this is one that I was told had had a lot of attention. So when they say that, you do need to pay attention to this one. But it's also got a little bit of a twist to it in comparison to what we've had from this style category before. So I have to say I'm just very curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Espergærde, which is close to Helsingør in the northern part of Sjælland in Denmark, to the north of Copenhagen, of course. And we're going to have a look at my second beer from the Many Worlds Brewing. So this particular beer is called No One Achieves Anything Alone. It comes in at 8.4% ABV, and this one is another New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So the twist with this beer is that it's been brewed with phantasm thiol powders, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in the video. But Jessica at the Beer Hive said this one has sold very well and had very good write-ups. So, you know, when she points me in the direction of these beers, I listen because she knows what she's talking about. Her and Nicolina at the Beer Hive are both great. So check out the link to their Facebook page in the video description below and you'll see all the stuff that they're releasing. I'll try and remember and put the Instagram one down there as well. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from the Many Worlds Brewing, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go to the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from that area, they will pop up. Otherwise, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. So yeah, let's crack on and chat again about the Many Worlds Brewing. So, as I've mentioned to you already, the Many Worlds Brewing are based in Espergærde, which is close to Helsingør in the northeastern part of Sjælland in Denmark, and the company was founded back in 2021, but it actually started as the home brewing project of Christopher Hauer a few years before, and he says that he's been home brewing seriously since around 2017. So he's been involved in the beer industry for a number of years. He worked as a bartender at Tap House in Copenhagen before then going on to work for Bruce Brewpub, which is associated with Total. And it was there that he really started to learn about the brewing trade. And he went on to work as a brewer at Total City and then for Mikkel Bauhavn, brewing the wort down at Warpig's Brewpub in Sjøtby in the meatpacking district. So yeah, he does have quite a good pedigree actually when it comes to brewing. But originally a few batches of the beers were brewed at Bruce, but then Chris moved the brewery to Espergærde and is now dedicating his time there fully. But they released their first commercial beers in 2021, and the brewery is operating a 14 hectolitre, 1,400 litre brew kit, and they aim to brew 25 batches over the course of 2022. I'm not sure if they have met that actually, but we are close to the end of 2022. But as of December 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced around 30 different kinds of beer, and most of the beers are named after different things involving science, because that's how Christopher really wants to go forward with his brewing. He wants to, you know, learn about the science of brewing and always learn the new techniques and things that are coming out. So yeah, this is one of the big things to keep an eye on with this brewery. But like I said, they have made a very good reputation for themselves. As far as I've seen, most of the beers they've released have been different kinds of IPAs, but there were one or two others in there when I looked at the list of beers when I originally wrote these notes a couple of months ago. So we need to keep an eye and see what these guys are putting out. Like I say, I would love to try a lager, a West Coast, and an Imperial Stout or something more malty from these guys. I think it's always good to do that to get an idea of the spectrum of what a brewery is capable of. But certainly within the New England Hazy category, these guys are doing some awesome stuff. And pardon me, This is the way you build your reputation these days when it comes to craft brewing. This is really annoying, guys. It's just the way it goes. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about the Many Worlds Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Untappd page to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually talk a little bit about the beer. Because like I said, this one has got a little quirk to it. But first off, I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one. You can see it's absolutely beautiful, but you can see there is the Many Worlds Brewing symbol, and you can see there it's like a base on Mars or something like that. Actually, I really do like the artwork on these cans. Elm 11 over here in Sweden are another one who have a similar concept with their artwork, kind of space agey and things, but it reminds me of the band Atoma from Stockholm, this ambient metal band. They're really, really good, so check them out if you are a metalhead like me. But yeah, to tell you a little bit about this beer then. So, the beer itself, as we said, this is an 8.4% New England Hazy Imperial Double IPA, whatever you want to call it. It's brewed using Phantasm thiol powders, which are New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc grape skins that have been dried and ground into powder. And in this brew, it was placed into the whirlpool, and then the beer was dry hopped with Nelson Sauvin and Pacific Sunrise. So yeah, I just want to check I've got the percentage of this beer right. Yeah, 8.4% ABV, because I think it actually said 8% on Untappd when I had a look at it earlier. But yeah, these Phantasm thiol powders are something I've never encountered before, and I think on the profile of the beer on Untappd as well, it said that this was only the second beer in Denmark ever that had been brewed with these, so that should be quite interesting. But yeah, out of the two hops in this one, Nelson Sauvin we know quite well. It gives you about 16% alpha acid, big kind of white green grapey flavours, of course, New Zealand hop. Pacific Sunrise though is one that I haven't come across all that often. So this is another New Zealand hop. It was released in 2000 and developed by Hort Research. It's created from a European and New Zealand male on one side, and then California cluster and Fuggle hops on the other. But it gives between 12 to 14% alpha acid, and apparently it is known for its piney qualities along with lemon and orange notes. So we need to see what we get out of this one, but I think, pardon me, the combination of Nelson Sauvin and these thiol powders will probably mean that this is a really kind of grapey leaning New England IPA, which I certainly enjoy. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then and see what we have. My god, this is annoying. But yeah, 8.4% New England Double IPA, this one with Phantasm thiol powder, Nelson Sauvin and Pacific Sunrise. So yeah, I think I didn't mention it's 12 to 14% alpha acid that you get from the Pacific Sunrise hop. So there we go. But yeah, we'll get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. Incidentally, this beer cost me 65 Danish kroner, so that is roughly about 85 Swedish. Danish beer, of course, is a little bit more expensive, so that's about €8.50 for the can. Somewhere in the region of like £8 sterling, maybe about £7.50, and I guess in the region of like $9 American. So this was a wee bit pricier, but you know, it's Danish beer. The Danish kroner is very strong just now, I have to say. So yeah, should be interesting nonetheless. The last beer we had from this brewery, as I say, was very, very good. So as you can see, this beer has poured pretty much as you would expect from a modern New England IPA. So before the head disappears, you can see that it's poured with a half finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. That is of course going to fade away to be a nice kind of thin foamy layer, but you can see in there's a mix. I think it's kind of medium sized bubbles, I would say that. It's not madly foamy, but it does have a nice little bit of that character to it. In terms of the colour of this beer, I would say that this one is a lovely kind of very rich, yeah, I'd say that it's a very kind of rich mango juice colour, this one. I always like comparing New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what the appearance reminds me of. But this one is like a very rich sort of mango juice colour. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer too. When it comes to this one, you normally don't have to care about those two variables when it comes to IPAs of any description, but when it comes to this one, I'm really not sure whether the Phantasm thiol powder will actually affect the will actually affect the flavour of this beer in any particular way. So yeah, it should be quite interesting. I'll need to actually look up the thiol powders and see what the chemistry of these things are. But thiol, of course, is like a sulfur oxygen kind of group. You get sulfur, oxygen, hydrogen. It's usually like a sulfur alcohol, basically. So yeah, I'll need to look up and see exactly what the structure of these molecules are. Lets me nerd out with my old chemistry from back in the day. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, it does look very, very nice, but definitely a more kind of rich note, so I wouldn't be surprised if this has got a slightly brown sugary leaning malt in it of some description, maybe a little bit of Golden Promise or something like that. But yeah, in terms of the level of haze in this one, it's certainly not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs that we've come across, but it does have a good bit of opacity to it at the same time. If I was looking at this blind, I might be tempted to think it was more of an American IPA rather than being a New England hazy. It just, you know what I mean? It doesn't have the big kind of soupy sort of thing to it, but it certainly has the very rich colour and the high opacity to it. But yeah, not much in the way of visible carbonation, just one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass at the bottom and a few wee ones going up toward the head. The head, incidentally, is now just a very thin, wispy layer. So yeah, I think we can take a look at the aroma of this one and see what it's all about. Very curious about this. So yeah, let's do this. Oh, that does smell very nice. It smells very good. And yeah, as I was kind of expecting, this one is like Nelson Sauvin or Enigma or Hallertau Blanc, these grapey hops. It really is just like that on steroids, I have to say. So yeah, these thiol powders are quite interesting. Yeah, I have to say, very impressed with the aroma of this. I'll give it a big thumbs up right away. So, on the hoppy side of things, it's actually the green component of this one isn't too pungent, be it grassy, piney, or floral. It's not madly pungent. You've got a big oily fruity character to this one, and then the malty backbone of the beer actually comes across as quite smooth. So yeah, this is really interesting from that perspective. This is quite different aroma wise. This really is quite different compared to what I've had in this category over the last wee while. But like I say, it's very, very grapey, and it almost has just a little bit of a vinous. When you sugar the beer up a wee bit, you actually get a very slightly vinous note out of this one, which makes sense when you consider what the thiol powders actually are. You do get a little bit of that, almost like when you sugar it up, you certainly do get a little bit of that white wine vinousy character out of this beer. And of course, we know Nelson Sauvin very, very well. It's going to give you these big white green grapey notes too. And almost gooseberry character as well. So yeah, this is interesting. But let's try and break this down, and we'll start with the malt base as we always do and just see what we get. But as I say, it's a big oily New England IPA, this one for sure. But the malt base for me, it's a bit difficult to pick up because of the pungency of everything else that's going on in the aroma. It's absolutely fair to say that. But the backbone of this beer, yeah, you get a little bit of the typical fresh white bready bread crust. There's a little bit of cracker in there, but that's not overly pungent in this particular beer. Yeah, a little bit of fresh white bread crust, a little bit of fresh white bread crust, a little bit of as you say, Jacob's cream cracker. Then there's a wee bit of a kind of wholemeal. You get a little touch of a wholemeal brown bread in there, but then it's more of a kind of dense white bready character. Just going to check. I think this beer probably has both wheat and oats in it. Yeah, it does. You can kind of smell that because it's got a more dense white bready character to it, which I think is great. So yeah, more dense white bready character. Absolutely more of a yeah. It really has a big dense white bready character to it. You can smell a little bit of the wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose too. The oats in this one are really quite smooth, but they've got a good little bit of dryness to them. And I know this beer is pretty fresh. I know this is fresh because Jessica told me it was. But the thing is, I've always said in these New England IPAs, when it comes to the oats, it's usually an indicator of how fresh your beer is. The creamier they are, the fresher the beer is, the drier they are, the older it is. In this one, the oats actually smell quite dense and slightly dry, and I'm not sure if that is just one of the effects of the thiol powders. You know, you have to remember with beer that, you know, hops, some specific hops can react with specific yeasts in very unusual ways and do different things. You know, there's so many different ingredients in these beers, they can all do different things. Depending on what you mix them with. But yeah, with this beer and the malt base, you do get a little touch of sweetness to it. There's a little bit of Werther's Original, a little bit of biscuit, but yeah. Other than that, it's quite it's quite interesting. This one, it almost has a little bit of an almost toasty, grainy character to it. This beer too. It's got like a toasty bread and butter type thing to it, which is kind of fun. So yeah, aroma wise, the malty side of this beer really is quite interesting. But on the hoppy side of things, the green component, this is interesting because you can tell with this beer, this is absolutely leaning toward, you've got a bit of the early edition hop from, you know, the thiol powders are quite interesting because you do get a little bit of the depth to the aroma from them. And as I've always said to you, there are 3 types of hoppings. Early edition hopping in the first hour of your wort boil, that's used mainly for the bitterness. The late edition hopping is within the last half hour of the wort boil, gives you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And then you've got the dry hopping, which comes afterward, and that is all flavour and aroma. So yeah, when it comes to this one, they've used the thiol powder in the whirlpool. So I'm not sure exactly what point during the boil they'll have used it, but you do get a little bit of the depth of the aroma for this one, because quite often New England IPAs rely on late addition and dry hopping, and that gives you a very bright green component rather than the more deep one like you get in the West Coast IPAs, which use all 3 kinds of hopping. So this one has, the green component in this one is somewhere in the middle. It's got a bit of depth to it, but it's also got a little bit of dryness, or a little bit of brightness, I should say, sorry, using the wrong word. But yeah, there's a little bit, you can get a little bit of the kind of piney resin in there from which will be, you know, Nelson Sauvin and Pacific Sunrise can both give you that. But yeah, it's quite floral and kind of oily in a sense. It's not too grassy, but there is a little bit of grassiness on the front, on the front part of your nose. Absolutely, there is a wee bit of that grassiness coming out of this one. So yeah, I really like how this beer goes together actually. The aroma on this one is really, really nice. Yeah, aroma wise, I think this beer is really nice on its green component, and it goes together well with the malt base. But on the fruity side of things, yeah, it really is, as you'd expect, very grapey. You've got a lot of gooseberry to this one. You've got a lot of that kind of white green grapey character. These are things you'd expect both from the thiol powders when you read about what they are, but also from the Nelson Sauvin hop. You do get, pardon me, there is a little bit of a kind of lemony and orangey character from the Pacific Sunrise, so I can see exactly what's going on there. But yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Mosaic. The orangey character you're getting out of Pacific Sunrise is kind of akin to the tangerine notes that you get from Mosaic. Maybe a little bit like a Zaka as well, actually. It really has that kind of brightness. So that's interesting. As I say, I've not come across Pacific Sunrise all that much, but I really need to get back to New Zealand and have a look at some of the beers down there. That's, you know, going to Wellington and doing some out and about videos is most definitely on the list. But yeah, aroma wise, this is really, really nice. Yeah, aroma wise, can't knock this at all. I'm just very curious about it. But as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma before you get stuck into the beer. But I think it is about time that we try this one. So yeah, this one is No One Achieves Anything Alone, 8.4% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from the Many Worlds Brewing in Espergærde, near Helsingør on Sjælland in Denmark. Phantasm thiol powders, Nelson Sauvin, and a little bit of Pacific Sunrise. Let's have a look at this and see what it's all about. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, this is really interesting. I mean, on first taste, this is really interesting and really quite quirky. And it's got a mix of this. The mouthfeel of this one's really smooth and creamy on one side, but then it's quite oily on the other. I've never had a New England IPA that's been quite like this. You get the soft breadiness coming out in the aftertaste too. Yeah, this is really unusual, but it's very nice. You can't ask for anything more than that. 3,600 beer reviews in, to get a New England IPA that does something really different and has quite a different flavour profile and aftertaste and stuff. This is always a treat. So I'm going to say thumbs up to the Many Worlds Brewing for doing something a wee bit different with this. But this is very nice. If if you're a fan of the likes of Hallertau Blanc, Nelson Sauvin, Enigma from Australia as well as another one. If you're a fan of these big sort of white, green, grapey leaning New England IPAs, you're going to love this. This is really nice. Yeah, let's just break this down and describe it a bit more in depth for you then. It's dangerously drinkable for 8.4% as well. It's a bit mental. So yeah, on the middle third of your palate then, you can feel that here. You've got a nice little bit, you do have a lovely little bit of a kind of, you've got a little bit of a kind of grainy, fresh bread crust backbone there. You absolutely get some of that. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you've got a wee bit more of a, you've got a little bit of a more kind of woody character in there as well. Above that, a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker for sure, and then you have the more dense things coming from the barley malt on this. So yeah, fresh white bread crust, bit of Jacob's cream cracker, a little bit of wood in there, and then yeah, a few other kind of things going on. So above the cracker notes, you've got a layer of this kind of more dense wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing to the beer. So yeah, you've got a lovely little bit of, you've got a bit of a more dense wholemeal brown bready sort of thing. Then above that, you get the kind of fresh but fluffy white bread, absolutely. And then you can feel above that, you've got the more dense, you can feel the dense wheaty character in this one, which is interesting. The wheat really is acting as a bit of a smoothing agent in the middle third of your palate, and then you've got the oats above that. Now the oats in this one, the oats in the flavour are a wee bit different to what you would expect from the aroma, because in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel there's a little sort of circle there, and you can feel in the dead centre there's a bit more of a dense oaty bit there, and they've got a bit of dryness to them as well, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, you've got a nice little bit of that dense, you've got a nice little bit of a dense oaty character there, but then as you move further out from that, you do get a little bit, you've got a bit of that dense kind of creaminess there, but as you move further out from that, you start to get some of the sweeter and slightly drier characteristics of the oat, and they just spread out toward the edges of that middle third of your palate. On top of that, you can feel right in the dead centre of your palate, there's a little sort of circle there, there's a little circle in there that, there's a little circle in there that has that kind of Werther's Original butter candy, Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing. Then as you move from outside of that, there's a bit more of a McVitie's digestive biscuity type character as well. So yeah, there's like the middle third of your palate on this one has quite a few layers in the malt base, and it works really well. It feels a bit different, it's really creamy but still quite fluffy at the same time actually. So yeah, the way the malty side of this beer goes together is interesting. I'm just curious as to what effect it is the thiol powders are going to have on that, because obviously it will change it will change the whole dimensions of the beer, to be honest with you. But I like it. That's the main question, is do you like this beer? Yes, I do. So let's look at the back third of the palate then and see what we've got going on there. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there once again, white bread of course, but the base of the back the base on the back third of the palate is more, you know, you've got the bread crust again, but it feels a little bit drier as always, you know, drier and more kind of malty. Drier flavours and more bitter flavours come out further back on the palate. Sweeter flavours come out further forward. So yeah, you've got that kind of grainy, bread crusty character there. But on top of that, you get a little bit more of the cracker, and again that's drier. Then the wholemeal brown bready layer, that's taller and more airy. The white bready layer, again, is more taller and airy. Then you've got the wheaty layer sitting on top of that. And in the back third of the palate, the wheat gives you a little bit of the wheat does give you that little bit of kind of bitiness and things that you want, so you can feel that in the back third of your palate. You feel the flavour is nice and tall there. Then as you come further forward, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together a little bit more. So yeah, the way that it goes together from that perspective is really nice. As I've said to you before, for me there are 6 things you should think about in a New England IPA. You know, farmhousey, yeasty character, and rye, lean and grainy side of things. Those are more prominent in American brewed IPAs. But then you've got wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also a little bit of kind of sweetness in these things as well. This beer for me really is, it's kind of got a good bit of yeasty character to it. You get the wheat, you get the oats, and you get the barley malt. This one's actually really well balanced in a lot of ways. But you get more of the yeasty notes. Above the wheat, you get a little bit of this airy, yeasty, farmhousey type bready character. But as I say, back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward, the flavours just squash together and kind of condense down a wee bit. But let's look at the hoppy and fruity side of this beer then. So, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. Then I'm surprised with the earthiness when you think about these hops, but yeah, I do get a little bit of earthiness there. But then as you come further forward, the green component really is very oily, and it's almost like, it almost tastes just like Nelson Sauvin. You get a little bit of piney resin and a little bit of floral character in there, but along the sides of your palate, it really is very much, it tastes like the fruity characters from Nelson Sauvin. That you get like oily gooseberry and like a slight white wine vinous sort of thing. It's more kind of white winey and vinous toward the back of the palate, to the back on the sides of your palate. But then as you move further forward, it gives you more of a kind of gooseberry sort of thing. But on the front corners of the palate, it's got a little bit of floral aromatic spice mixed with a bit of that white wine vinous note. But then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit more kind of oily and grassy in a sense. You've got a little touch of zestiness there, but you get more of an oily gooseberry thing. So the thiol powders are interesting because they're taking the place of the green component of the beer. I always find you get the green component on the edge of the palate, the floral and piney resins and stuff like this. But yeah, the thiol powders are giving you like the fruity, oily characters that you would expect of, say, Nelson Sauvin around the edge of the palate. It just feels like that. It feels like this beer is like Nelson Sauvin on steroids. That's probably a good way to describe what's going on in this one. But it's interesting that with these thiol powders, because if you think about when you have a fruit sour beer or a fruit IPA, whenever you add fruit into beer as an adjunct, it always does the same. It suppresses the green component and sits on the edge of the palate. And with these thiol powders, it seems to be doing the same thing. So for me, that's quite an interesting quirk I'm noticing with this one. But I think we've covered the green component in this one, if we can call it that, because as I say, thiol powders, it's not really from the hops in this case. But yeah, let's look at the front third of the palate and the fruity side of the beer. So, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a bready build-up in this one. So yeah, nice little bit of white bready build-up there. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of soft, you've got a little bit of the kind of bread crusty note there, but mainly it's kind of a soft white bread and slightly oaty character. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And this one is pretty much exactly as you'd expect. The base is like gooseberry, white green grape. It's Nelson, it's the Nelson Sauvin. But then toward the front of that, front third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of the kind of lemony and orangey character, which I'm guessing is from Pacific Sunrise. The fruity side of this beer is pretty straight shooting. yeah, on the front third of your palate, as I say, you've got this base layer of like white green grapes, gooseberries, but then as you move toward the kind of front tip of your palate, you'll get, yeah, a little bit of a lemony and orangey character from the Pacific Sunrise. It's a really, I think this is a really kind of well done beer, and it's very, very interesting. I have to say, the thiol powders are something that I don't think I've ever come across before, but something that I should keep an eye out for in the future, actually. So big thumbs up to Many Worlds Brewing for doing something a wee bit different with this, and it has worked out quite well, and it's made me think, which is good. You know, you want beers that do this, that test your palate a little bit after 3,600. Crazy to think that's what we've done. But yeah, let's go on and round off with the mouthfeel then. We've talked a wee bit about the mouthfeel in this review already. But yeah, for me, overall, I would say that this beer, is quite, it's really, it's pushing toward it's kind of bottom end full bodied for me. The carbonation is very smooth. It's got this big oily nature to it, but at the same time, it's very creamy and smooth. There's a real kind of balance in there, a mixture between being creamy and smooth. In terms of IBUs, this beer to me feels as if it's very low in IBUs, but you do, as I say, get a little bit from the thiol powders and things. You do get a little bit of what could be bitterness in this one. It comes across as being maybe 25 or 30-ish IBUs, but it lingers into the aftertaste. So yeah, it's difficult to place exactly how many IBUs this beer would be. I wouldn't be surprised if it was technically 0, but yeah, there is just a little bit kind of piney resin or minty freshness kind of lingering on the sides of the palate with this beer, and some of the vinous character as well is there. But yeah, the malt base, as we said, very smooth, kind of creamy, a little bit sweet, and you've also got these big oily, fruity notes coming out of it as well. So yeah, I really like how this one, I do really like how this beer goes together in that sense. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Big oily, fruity notes, big grapey leaning New England IPA. So yeah, a big thank you to Jessica for the recommendation for this one. And as I said, make sure you check out the make sure you check out their shop in Amar in Copenhagen. I've just noticed on the side there as well, this looks like a little animal. Yeah, so a little bit of a foamy animal on the side of my glass there, which is kind of cool. But yeah, lovely beer this one, and I'm really glad I got to review it for you here on the channel. I'll need to keep an eye on the Many Worlds Brewing and see if they do some different styles a little bit later on, or if they do anything quirky within the New England IPA category again. But yeah, I think we can leave it there. So this one was the No One Achieves Anything Alone, a New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from the Many Worlds Brewing in Espergærde on Sjælland in Denmark. An up-and-coming brewery, this one. Keep an eye on them. Try some of the beers. I'm sure you'll like them. But again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from the Many Worlds Brewing as well, and we will return to these guys very, very shortly, I'm sure. Slàinte, skål, cheers. See you guys later.